We are what hides everybody. We are the evil. We are the darkness. These are our stories.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I have 3 terrifying true tales to haunt your dreams. Hello, I'd like to start out by saying I'm currently 16 years old, and as a kid I had a pretty good imagination. Or that's what I've been told by my mother. I've seen many things in my house and heard many things too. However, before I elaborate on those things, some background information. My mother is very spiritual. She attends spirit churches with her medium friend who delivers messages. And from what I've heard, they're quite accurate, along with other such information about dead relatives or friends to those in need. My mother has been going to this church for several months now, and since the first time, the experiences at home have died down a lot. She also tells me about how she often gets a smell of ladies' perfume in the living room. I have once smelt this perfume as well. Neither me or my mother were wearing a scent at the time. She has also told me about a glass tray on the counter on the right side of the living room. This tray, when on the counter, gets tapped and makes a distinct noise. Although I've never heard the noise, I believe what my mother has told me. Sorry for the length and background information, I just thought it was necessary. So the first experiences happened when I was young, in primary school. I'd say around 6 or 7 years old. These experiences I can remember quite vividly. The first was when I was asleep, a night before school. I woke up in terror while staring at the foot of my bed. I saw a man, or an apparition of a man who was solid black, almost two-dimensional. He stood there looking into a thick open book that was in his left hand. He then looked up before vanishing as my mother ran into the room. I have no idea how she knew what was happening, as I don't recall making any noise. Roughly a year later, when I was 8, I was brushing my teeth before school. I had been awake for quite some time. I looked into the mirror and saw a green, hunched man with a malicious grin on his face, which revealed his yellow, stained teeth. I screamed and flinched away, only to look back to see him gone. Since then and up to now, I've been getting a feeling of being watched throughout my house. Whenever I go up the stairs at night, I can hear footsteps behind me. My ears prick up, and I turn to find an empty staircase. As well as this, when I've been playing on my computer, my door would open on its own, and my door hanger would be thrown across the hallway. This would be followed by the sensation of someone standing behind me, and a cold breath on my neck. On top of this, my hand has been touched many times with a firm grip. I would never fully react because I would normally be immersed in the game. I also hear the sound of glass breaking, pottery breaking, and cupboards being slammed downstairs whilst I sit alone in my room on Sunday nights. This occurs quite often, and there's never anyone down there. I check whilst wielding my air rifle. Call me paranoid, but I live in a somewhat rough area. As well as these occurrences, I've seen apparitions of a man who stood at the other side of my utility. My dog never reacts to this, and his bed is right there where I see him standing. Recently, I heard a voice say my name while I was in bed. This was around 11. Clear as day, I heard my name. Will. Right in my ear. I freaked out big time. I also have a sleep recording of when I awoke from a night terror. Could these be linked? I've also been having odd dreams about dead relatives where I can see those who I've never met before, such as my granddad. I saw him and I could describe his every feature to my mother, and she recognized the description. Sorry for the long descriptions. Thanks for any advice, and I'll try to respond to as many questions as possible. It wasn't Dad. This didn't happen to me. However, I did witness this incident, and it creeps me out to this day. Back in junior high school, there was this popular kid named Ryan that used to bully me, and tons of other people in our school. Ryan was the type of kid that thought he was the best in the world because he was captain of the football team. The kid that bullied nerds and cheated on his girlfriends, you know the type. Ryan's father ran an automotive parts store. His specialty was paint jobs and window tinting. He had many vehicles, but his favorite was a dark blue truck with orange and yellow flames on the front. It also had tinted windows, spinning hubcaps on the wheels, the works. Ryan's father often wore the same team jersey as his son's team jersey, a red and white hat, and blue jeans. As you continue reading, you will soon discover why the details of this particular truck as well as its owner are very important. One day, on my way to my next class, I fell down the stairs and sprained my ankle. I ended up limping to the nurse's office and calling my dad to come pick me up. After that, I sat in the waiting area looking out for my dad's car. About 5 minutes after I left the nurse's office, Ryan walked into the waiting area and sat down. Bored out of his mind, Ryan decided to talk to me while we were waiting, for our dads to pick us up. I guess he felt safe talking to a nerd since his friends weren't around, so I begrudgingly decided to be polite with him and made small talk. About 5 or so minutes later, Ryan looked out the glass doors and saw his father's truck pulling into the entrance of the school. Ryan said, "See you later, man," picked up his backpack and headed towards the glass doors. He was about to push the door open when suddenly he stopped and paused. When I asked him what was wrong, Ryan explained to me that his father usually picked him up later, and that he usually parked his truck right next to the glass doors. Instead, Ryan's dad was 20 minutes early. The truck was next to the flagpoles, which were much further away, and the hubcaps appeared to be different and didn't even spin. After a few minutes of this, Ryan's cell phone then went off. Ryan at this point simply assumed that it was his dad calling and didn't pick it up. So he walked out the door and headed towards the truck. I decided to take a nap while I waited for my own dad to pick me up. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like an older man yelling and Ryan screaming. I looked out the window only to see Ryan flailing his arms and an older man trying to pull him into the truck. Because of my ankle, I couldn't run to Ryan's aid, so I shouted to the nurse as well as to some of the other staff members to get help. One of the nurses immediately called the police. A couple of secretaries ran towards the truck to help Ryan. Upon seeing the secretaries running towards him, the creep shoved Ryan away and climbed further into his truck. The guy then sped off and disappeared into the intersection that led into a nearby highway. Ryan, at this point, was crying in pain, mainly because the guy had pepper sprayed him. The secretaries helped pour Ryan to his feet and guided him to the nurse's office. About a few minutes later, the police, along with Ryan's real father, arrived. The police as well as an ambulance tended to Ryan while a couple of different police officers interviewed me and the other witnesses. Because I was the only student that witnessed this, the police, as well as Ryan's dad, asked me to stay in touch and hang out with Ryan, just so that he could have a shoulder to lean on and recover emotionally. So I swallowed my pride and gave Ryan my phone number. From that day forward, Ryan was a completely different person. The same person who used to body slam me into lockers was now in constant fear and used me as a shield instead of a punching bag. There wasn't a day at school where Ryan wasn't around me. He was especially clingy and paranoid when it came to having his dad pick him up. I would have to hold his hand and stay there with him until his dad came around. It even got to the point that Ryan would call me every night to vent his fears as well as update me on what the police would find. And many of the details about this were very, very creepy. For instance, the creep, whoever he is, not only knew where Ryan went to school and where he got picked up, he even knew which vehicle Ryan's dad drove whenever he picked his son up from school. So he decided to imitate everything about Ryan's father. That's right, the creep actually went through the trouble of painting his own truck the same colors as the father's, just to fool and lure Ryan. He even dressed up like Ryan's dad. Ryan even said to me that the disguise was so convincing that it wasn't until he looked the creep in the eye that he realized he wasn't his father. Yet things got even creepier the more Ryan told me, and the more the police department found out. As it turns out, the creep also knew Ryan's cell phone number, but wasn't the one who called Ryan. Ryan told me that the police said that the mysterious number belonged to a payphone at a nearby gas station, so the creep in the truck couldn't have possibly called him, meaning that not one, but two people may have been involved in this. Despite having video surveillance, a license plate, and a description of the driver, the police never found the guy, or his gas station buddy, even when the creep continued to terrorize Ryan and his dad. About 3 months after the truck incident, Ryan called me in the middle of the night, this time in hysterics. Someone had thrown several Molotov cocktails at Ryan's house. A couple of them even hit and shattered a window and set part of his house on fire. About a month after the Molotov cocktails were thrown, someone, most likely the same creep, set fire to Ryan's father's business. Ryan and his father moved out of the area not long after. The creep also disappeared, leaving everyone else to wonder just who he was. Was the creep a disgruntled parent or relative of a student that Ryan bullied? Was he the engaged parent or relative of one of Ryan's many ex-girlfriends? Was he a parent of a rival team member? Was he a dissatisfied customer of Ryan's father? Or was he just a random creep that liked to terrorize teenage boys? The possibilities as to who this guy was and why he, as well as his accomplice, would target Ryan were endless. With Ryan now gone, I quickly found myself getting very frightened over the possibility of the same creep going after me. For a long time, I was super paranoid about the creep going after me and subjecting me to even worse terror than Ryan had experienced. From that day forward, I refused to be picked up from school, no matter how sick or hurt I was. All because I feared that some creep was going to do the same thing to me. Even to this day, the whole incident sends shivers down my spine. I want to preface this by saying I am directionally challenged and I'm easily lost. And when lost, I am very much flustered. About 5 years ago, I was heading out to a friend's birthday party at a park in an area of the city that I wasn't familiar with. I only knew one way to get there by heart, so I took it. Eventually, I encountered a detour sign as the road ahead was closed for construction or maintenance, so I followed the detour and wound up painfully lost. So I'm driving around and I don't recognize anything. I'm already sort of upset and confused and I'm way late to this party. I eventually decide to turn around and accidentally cut a truck off switching lanes. He didn't slam on the brakes not to hit me, but it was a bit rude and I did the hand wave like, yeah, I'm sorry. A few minutes later, I noticed the truck is about a car behind me. Not super weird, except he's following my random turns while I tried to figure out how to get back to where I was. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but as we kept going, I was convinced he was following me. He eventually starts tailgating me, flipping me off, blaring his horn. There aren't many other cars anymore, and I'm absolutely freaking out and do something really stupid. I pull into a parking lot with the intention of cutting through it to a busier street on the other side. I realize that it's not a through parking lot, but he's behind me and I can't turn around. So I keep going and it turns into this weird back alley surrounded by grass between two buildings, which comes out to a dead end. So I stop. He stops behind me, turning his truck to block off the majority of the street. So I sit there, my mom on the phone, waiting. He's just sitting in his truck, watching me. I'm giving her a play-by-play. I think a good 4 to 5 minutes pass of neither of us moving before he opens his truck door. He's screaming at me, calling me names. He starts walking towards me, then stops and turns around. He leans into the car, then comes back out. This time, he's got a crowbar. He's walking towards me again, waving it as he's screaming. I start crying and my mom is calling the police on another phone. She's asking me where I am and I don't know and I'm very scared. So I turn my wheel as sharply as I can to the left. I decide to go over the curb, which weren't normal curbs. They were very tall and very square. And I drive on the grass and just gun it. My wheel and front end hit the curb pretty bad on the way up. The strip of grass between the street and the building was narrow, and I wound up breaking off my driver's side mirror and scraping my front end up near the headlight. I managed to get around him and tear off down the alley, through the parking lot, into the closest building I could find, which happened to be a hospital. My mom's on the phone with me the whole time, and the police come to meet me there and take a statement. I told them he was an older man with short gray hair, stained jeans, wearing a highlighter yellow shirt. I described the truck as best I could with my limited car lingo. They kept asking make or model, and I'm like, it was a truck. They were really annoyed. So they have one of the officers go down the alley where it was to see if he was still there. They find the evidence of me driving on the grass and such, but no truck and definitely no man. One of the businesses had a security camera facing the entrance to the alley, and the police eventually were able to get footage. The camera did not get an image of his license plate, and the pictures of him is from a bad angle and blurry. But it was proof enough with my car insurance company to prove I wasn't just being a reckless dumbass intentionally. In the end, I had a bent rim and a flat tire. My front end alignment was completely messed up, and I needed to replace the driver's side mirror, which, in retrospect, is much better than replacing my skull. They never found the guy, but I'm still really scared of driving around in unfamiliar places. Wow, wasn't that just goosebump inspiring? I do hope you enjoyed today's 3 tales. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And have a terrifying evening.